Hello folks, it's Space again. Welcome to another model review video. And this time we've got the EFE GM standard in Lancashire United livery. Now I've already done the GM standard for EFE, so this is more of a mini review rather than a full one. I will put a link in the description to this video to the previous review I did, the full review, if you'd like to watch that. But as I've got one of these, I thought I'd do a separate review of it. I repainted one of these quite some time ago because it was the cheapest donor model I could find at the time, but I always felt a bit guilty about it because it's a really nice model, so I wanted to put one in my collection and just keep it in the condition that EFE intended, and so here we are. So I'll take it out of the box and then we'll talk a bit about Lancashire United Transport. We'll go through the history of the rail bus and we'll describe why this model isn't quite all that it seems. We'll do a little bit of that when we get to the look around, but there's a bit more of it to tell you beforehand before we start looking around. So we'll go into that and we'll have the all-important look around, and then we'll talk about how much it will cost you if you want to put one of these in your collection. So first of all, I'll unbox it. So there it is. So this one is catalogue number 29004, released in January of 2004. As I said, it wasn't all it seems, and I'll talk about that in a second. It's in the livery of Lancashire United Transport. Now, Lancashire United was at one time the largest independent bus operator in the UK. It also operated trams at one time under the name of South Lancashire Tramways, and then replaced them with trolleybuses under the name of South Lancashire Transport. But from sort of the late 1950s onwards, it had been a bus operator just under its name, Lancashire United Transport, which is what it run buses under all the way through. It was bought by Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Executive, PTE, in 1976. Now, the takeover wasn't a surprise. There'd been talks behind the scenes for a few years, and Lancashire United actually changed its vehicle policy, so it was more similar to the PTEs. So some buses that were quite similar to this had already been taken into stock when it was still officially an independent company, because the management and I think the employees as well knew that it was going to be taken over by the PTE at some point. As I say, that happened in 1976. For a couple of years or so, the PTE kept the identity and livery, but then the buses began to be painted into the PTE's orange and white livery, albeit in a different ratio. There was more orange on the Lancashire United ones, and they retained the Lancashire United Transport fleet names alongside the M logo of Greater Manchester Transport. In 1981, the subsidiary Lancashire United was brought into the main fleet, so the buses received Greater Manchester Transport fleet names and they began to be painted in the normal PTE livery, so the identity went. Apart from on this particular bus that's been modelled. So this is far more relevant than you might think. You might think, oh, it's a 70s model, but it actually survived into the mid to late 80s, as we will discuss. This bus retained its red and grey livery. Initially it was done unofficially. It just happened to keep missing its repaint date. It's like, oh no, we've sent it out on service. What a shame, we can't repaint it. Eventually, in 1983, the PTE gave up and authorised it to be repainted into red and grey livery, so it got a fresh coat of the same livery as like a heritage vehicle. A lot of operators were doing it at that time. There was a lot of uncertainty in the industry about the forthcoming privatisation and deregulation of buses, and whether the jobs would be secure and things like that, and morale in the industry was quite low. So a lot of places did do heritage repaint. Some of them marked, centenaries and things, but other ones were just done as morale booster, just to, give the staff a bit of a boost, really. And it worked wherever they did them. I mean, obviously, in 1983, there had been a lot of staff who had worked for Lancashire United, still on the books of the PTE, and they appreciated seeing that gleaming in its red and grey livery again. So yeah, it would have worked well. So it was withdrawn from normal passenger service in late 1986, by which time the PTE had set up an arm's length company called GM Buses to operate its bus services. It was run like a private company, but all the shares were held by the PTE, and the bus had worked for GM Buses still in the Lancashire United red and grey. But it was withdrawn in late 1986 from normal passenger use, and it spent a year or so in the driver training fleet after that, still in its red and grey livery. Its look finally ran out in early 1988 when it was sold to Thamesdown Transport of Swindon, who obviously painted it into their livery. They didn't need a Lancashire United heritage vehicle down in Swindon for some reason. So they painted it in their cream and sort of blue, purpley blue livery, and rebuilt the destination plan to their specifications as well. Became their fleet number 207, and as far as I'm aware, they were its last operator. It had been new. missed that bit of the history. It had been new in September of 1977 as fleet number 501, by the way, and it was renumbered 6917 in the PTE series when the fleet numbers were all numbered in a common series. So that is the real bus. So as I said, the model was released in January of 2004, but it was actually a reworking of an earlier model. One of the first signs that EFE were in some kind of trouble was these reworkings, really. What they'd done, they'd produced a load of models that hadn't really sold. So they had loads of unsold models in the workshop, in the warehouse, should I say. And rather than just let them fester there, they took them back into the workshop and rehashed some of them, put new fleet numbers, registration numbers, destination plans on them. Some of them were not very subtle. They did a South Wales minibus that had big labels stuck over the fleet names of the original livery. The labels stuck out from the side. They were really obvious as a later addition. But this one was a bit more subtle. So the original model had been catalogue number 29002, released in April of 2003. And it was a model of vehicle 511, registered PTD 655S, on route 644 to Warrington. So you can still find those about. As I said, it didn't sell that well, so they had a load of unsold ones. So they took a load of them back into the workshops and redid them as fleet number 6917, registered PTD 645S, which is the model we've got, on route 980 to Blackmore. Now, arguably, that's the model they should have done to start with, because, as I said, it carried Lancashire United livery for a lot longer than any of the other ones, right through into GM Buses' days. So, you know, that would have been the ideal one to model in the first place, and it might have sold better. But anyway, they got there eventually. So, yeah, it's a Leyland Fleetline. Obviously, the Fleetline originally marketed by Daimler, but rebadged as a Leyland in the mid-70s. Leyland Fleetline with Northern Counties body. So, let's have a look around it. So, we start, with, as ever, with the front end. As I mentioned on the original review, the front door's pretty good, but the grille, the ventilation grille there is printed on, which is a bit weird because, as I explained again in the main review, this is quite clearly Northern Counties body bus. The other builder of the standards for GM Greater Manchester PTE was Park Royal, but they had quite a lot of detail differences, and you couldn't pass this off as a Park Royal. So why they didn't cast the grille in, I don't know, but it didn't. It's just printed on. Front window doesn't look too bad. It's not quite there. It should be two bits of glass, flat glass in a V shape. It's kind of almost the right shape, but just not quite. The centre dividing bar is just printed on as well. They are in a V shape. If you run your finger across it, you can feel the V. But it looks almost right, but not quite. The standard PTE 3-part destination plan, which Lancashire United had also used before the PTE took them over, is their intermediate blind there, Atherton and Tilsley, 980 route number, and the ultimate destination Blackmore. You can see, if I hold it to the camera a little bit, possibly, yeah, you can just about see there's a little bit of the black behind the 980 coming away, and that's works, and a little bit on the Blackmore as well, under the R of Blackmore. You can see the edge isn't perfect, and that's because they've been printed on over the original destination blind, and they're basically coming off. So, yeah, that's just a little minor thing. A little grill there, printed on. Let me just try and get the camera to focus. That's better. Windscreen, very, very good indeed. It captures the shape of the windscreen of the GM standards really well. Wipers and dividing bar, there is some relief to those, and they're picked out in black, very nice. And the lower panel, nice as well. Side lights, indicators, and the headlights and fog lights. Registration plate on a little sticking out plinth. Again, I'll just try and get the camera to focus, and it's not playing ball. Let me move the model about a little bit. I reckon that's about as good as we're going to get. And the mirror's looking quite good. That one looks a little bit crushed in, but it's not too bad actually. Round to the near side, general impression of shape and size is pretty good. The yeah, shape's nice. The beading along there is just printed on, but it's a nice feature. The door looks good. They had quite a heavy looking door to the GM standards, and that's replicated nicely there. Various bits of lettering and things on it. Again, the blind not quite perfectly printed because it's over printed, as we said. Still got Lancashire United Transport legal lettering on this one. They haven't corrected that, which they should have done. It's Howbridge Atherton is the address, which was the original Lancashire United address, but of course by the time it was carrying the number 6917, it would have been registered to the PTE at Devonshire Street, North Ardwick. So it's only a minor thing, they just haven't corrected it on the reissued model. Unladen weight there, the windows look really good. They are printed on, there's no relief to them, but they don't look printed, they look pretty decent. And they capture the GM opening hopper vents really nicely. Wheels are good as well. Hub of the front one picked out in silver and all very nice. As we said in the main review, the back of these is the same on all of the EFE GM standards, whether it's supposed to be Atlanteans or Fleetlines, and it is actually an Atlantean back. But as we said on the first review, it's not a game changer. If you display it in your display case, it'll be at that angle, and generally on the layout it'll be kind of facing you or something like that. You won't immediately notice that the bustle is wrong, unless somebody points it out. You know, if one of your friends comes around and says, "Oh, that's got an Atlantean bustle," you know, we've all got one of those friends, I suppose. But yeah, it's not a big game changer. It doesn't really matter that much. I mean, yeah, it's not ideal, obviously, if you're into your detailed models and things, but it doesn't have to spoil your enjoyment of it completely. Round to the back, emergency exit looks pretty decent, between decks panelling as well. Blind and registration plate things printed on there. Rear lower deck window looks good. Panel sloping back as it should do. The emergency stop for the engine cast in there. And again, Atlantean bustle. The little Daimler badge is not fooling anybody. This one I think was a Leyland Fleetline anyway, so it would have been badged Leyland Fleetline, not Daimler. But yeah, it's not too bad, and the lights look pretty decent. The silver surround quite nicely done as well. Round to the offside, not much else to report really. Again, emergency exit nicely done. The step there looks good. The grille, again Atlantean grille, but hey. Driver's signalling window, not bad. Looks pretty decent. Go up to the roof. The panel lines are decent, and so is the cover dish for the radio aerial. One thing that these models had, not all of the EFE production had them luckily, is these horrific looking skylights. Some of the rail buses had them. They were opaque, they weren't see-through, but neither were the bright silver. They just tampo printed them on, and they look absolutely awful, to be honest. The best thing you can do is take them off. It looked better with them missing than it will on these. They just look too brash, too bright. They don't really capture the look of the original. I'm not quite sure if they had two on at this point. I know some of the earlier ones did. Some of the later ones just had one, and then the later ones still didn't have any. But yeah, they don't look that good. I mean, again, from normal viewing, it's not too bad, but yeah, they look a bit weird, and I'm not a fan of them, to be honest. But each to their own. If you like them, then that is entirely your choice. Chassis detail cast in quite nicely. Got some air tanks there, the fuel tank, bits of the back suspension, underside of the engine. Finished in red colour. As anybody who watches my reviews regularly will know, that's always a bit of a bête noire to me. I like them done in a kind of a black colour, because as I always say, if you display it on a hill or it's on a higher shelf in your display case, you can see the underside shining at you in body colour, and it doesn't look realistic. Whereas done in black, it tones it down quite nicely. Interior, as always, on an EFE, quite nicely detailed, but you can't see it because they've done it all in one colour. In this case, kind of maroon colour, which is not right. It would have had a GM standard interior, I would imagine. So sort of wood effect, seat backs, and a kind of, I don't know if these had the orangey maquette. I think they had the later sort of blue-based maquette, if I remember rightly. But yeah, either way, they wouldn't have been the colour it's modelled there. There is a bit of different colour in the driver's cab. You can see the seats black, and so is the steering wheel and driver's console, which don't look too bad. All in all, it is a nice model. It's a nice livery, and as I say, it's more useful than you would think, because the rail bus carried this scheme until early 1988. So, you know, it survived a lot longer than you would imagine. And it would look very, very good in a display of perhaps a lot of orange buses with just that one in the middle of them. That would look really, really good indeed. How much will it cost if you want one of them? Well, I've had a look on eBay. I'm doing this in June 2025, filming this review. And the cheapest one I could find was £15 plus £3.95 postage and packing, so £18.95. I think the most expensive was £26.95 plus postage. 29002, the original model that it was done, you know, before they reworked it, that was started at £20 including postage and packing, and it went up to about the same. So somewhere between you know, £18, £19 and 26.27, somewhere around there for either the 29002 or 29004 catalogue numbers. But it is a nice model, it's a nice livery, and as I say, it's more useful is this particular one, catalogue number 29004, than you would think. So anyway, as always, thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.